All right, we are now officially live, apparently. All right, so for anyone watching, it's been about 2 weeks since my last podcast. Where have I been? Under a rock. Today I have with me Chris Rigas. I hope I'm pronouncing Rigas correctly.
Rigas, yeah.
Rigas, perfect. Well, yeah, thanks for coming on the show today.
No problem. Pleasure
So
to
if
be
you
here.
want to give a bit of an introduction about who you are and I guess, what it is that we want to talk about today.
So, I'm Chris Rigas. I ran for the regional council last election. I'm an entrepreneur in the area here, restaurateur, and my family's been involved in the restaurant business here in Niagara for over 40 years. Myself, I've been on my own in St. David's, Niagara Lake, there for the last 25. I just have a passion for politics, so I decided to throw my hat in the ring. Got a little upset what was going on at the region, so I figured I'd do something about it, and now I'm here talking to you about different things.
Well, I mean, you're not alone about your being upset about definitely a lot of things going on in the local politics. I mean, even you look provincial and federal politics, it just seems like things have been becoming more and more heated. And so I think one of the things that kind of drew us together is like our common struggle and the fact that we both decided to take it upon ourselves and to run for office to try to make some changes in the last election. So for people listening, I have a whole list. I got about 30 questions, and a lot of them definitely have to do with our past elections, some of the things like what we learned and what our reason was for running and things like that. So yeah, let's get started. So first of them, well, hello Tony Caruso. Thank you for saying hi. Good to see you on there.
Hi Tony.
So are you a resident of Niagara Lake or Niagara Falls?
Niagara Falls. I live in Niagara Falls, just into the city limits there. Been North End boy my whole life in Niagara Falls, and I've been doing business in Niagara Lake for the last 20 years.
Okay, because I did see that you went to AMI.
I did.
Okay, all 4 years.
All my years. I did one course at Stanford, political science course at Stanford, but I graduated from Meyer. So.
Okay, I think my cousin lived right in that area, but he went to the Catholic school that would have been like within
St.
the boundary. Yeah, St. Paul. Yeah, my uncle still lives up in that neighborhood, just off of, I want to say it's off of Morrison. I could be wrong on the street, but somewhere like off of Thorold Stone there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got connected, you and I, but with Gus Coronius. So I just want to ask, how long have you been friends with Gus, or how did you meet Gus?
Well, Gus I've known for a couple of years. He's been coming into the restaurant for a while. I met him there.
He likes his food.
Yeah, he likes his food. He's Greek. He moved into the area here, and got to know him a little bit. And he's got same kind of political leanings and passions that I do about politics. And we get along. It's good, and it's just a natural kind of thing. And being that we're both Greek, has that
family.
Has that further connection, right? So. We became friends. It's good.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know who Gus is, Gus actually ran for local council here in Niagara Lake in the last election. Probably the best looking guy on the ballot for sure. Unfortunately, they don't put pictures on the ballot. So maybe eventually we'll get to there. And yeah, so I also saw when I did some research on you, are you heavily involved in the Greek community? I saw your name was involved on, I think it's, was it like there's a Greek community church or something?
So the Greek community of Niagara is in St. Catharines there.
Right.
I'm a member. My father's a member. We both have the same name as well. We do support our community quite a bit. We hold functions for them at our banquet facilities, and we attend various events. And my kids all go to language school there on Wednesday nights. So.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's one thing I'm sad. Like my mom's side is Italian, and I don't really speak much Italian. I mean, I speak with my hands though, so I mean that wasn't okay. That was seriously that. So I've got it in my blood, obviously, but that's something that I definitely regret not starting at an earlier age. Like here and there, I try to learn some Italian, but I guess just knowing that French being an official language here, I've been putting a lot of emphasis on learning that every day instead of any other language. But
makes sense too.
Yeah, like I was in Italy last year. I was in Palermo in Sicily, and worked my way up to Rome, and. I learned enough how to order a large pizza with, certain toppings on it, but that was pretty much it. Prego, por favor. I'm probably speaking Spanish now. Okay, so yeah, I asked you already about how you went to A and Meyer, and you were always I guess North End Niagara Falls kind of guy. What was did they have a mascot there at A and Meyer?
They didn't at the time. I don't recall one, anyways. They've always had a kind of a look of I guess a kind of like an old school kind of pirate slash soldier type
It's
deal.
always got to be something that
Yeah,
like could
like a marauder.
crusade.
Yeah. Like, So it was. I don't remember it. Offhand. It's been quite a while. I won't say how long it's been.
When I went to Holy Cross in St. Catharines, it was the Holy Cross Raiders, and again, it's always like some sort of like a crusader, or like sometimes you hear like, oh, it's the pirates, or it's the And then when I went to Brock, there was the Badgers, and it was like, oh, like cute, fun, like I don't know.
Well, they're mean. Badgers can be mean.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably some nasty Badgers and leave a nice dent in your car. So I also, again, some more of my stalking of you beforehand, but so is it true you bought the Old Firehall Restaurant from your father about 20 years ago?
Yes.
Okay. And so how long have you been in the restaurant game? I know you were saying earlier, I guess basically your whole life.
My whole life. I'm so my family originally had our Niagara Falls location since 1977. We had it in 1977. So ever since then, dating myself, but yeah, ever since then we've been in the restaurant business. I basically grew up in the business. So, and all of my relatives on my Greek side have restaurants. And
well, I mean, it makes sense why you're a restaurateur today. No, that is awesome. So my dad has a trucking company. I don't have a D license. I don't have an A license. And, people ask me, why is that? And it's because my dad told me, like, don't be a trucker.
Don't be a trucker.
Yeah. Like, don't get into that. So it's been, I guess, good. Like, he's never really pushed me into it, but I'm like, I'm sure because you went the route of becoming a restaurateur, I'm sure it was that no one pushed on you, but you realized, this is.
Yeah. I just had it's just a natural kind of thing for me. So, I enjoy people and enjoy talking to them. I know food, food service. So it was just a natural kind of move into it for me. You come, as you're growing up, you're involved at different stages and doing different things. And then you just move into, I went away to school for a couple of years. I was in Ottawa, Carleton. Wasn't really, into more of a results kind of guy. I like to see immediate results rather than slow trickle down kind of stuff.
Yeah, like let's say you're like a policy planner or something.
Yeah, so I got frustrated with that. I left that and came back home, and then went to work with my father. And then after a few years, I decided to go on my own there in the place there.
And I'm curious about where you're at. It's the corner of Creek Road and York Road and St. David's.
Yeah, the Old Firehall.
So yeah, I want to ask. So obviously it's old, but how old is it? And like, what's the history behind it?
So 1942, it was a volunteer station for obviously for fighting fires back in the day. They had quite a few beers there too as well. It lasted for them until 1985. It was able to service their needs, I guess, until that time. But with updated equipment and new regulations coming into play as far as the type of equipment you needed, training, all that other stuff, I think they needed a different location. So they moved over to Warner Road, and then it was surplus, and the city sold it to a gentleman, and then we ended up buying it from him about a year after that. I can't remember his name at the time. That was 1989 or 1990, and took us a few years to get it open. But we got it open late summer of '94. So this is our somewhat. I don't call it our 25th season because it's not a full season. Mm-hmm. Next year, I consider our 25th season, but it's 24 and a half.
So. Any big plans for the Big 25?
No, I don't think that we'll see a lot of difference. There's a couple things on the back burner there that we've been holding, in our pocket, and see how things shake out in the area here, as far as development goes and how things will move forward. But we've always had a plan there, and we'll probably pull the trigger on that in the near future.
Well, if you have a big event or barbecue, just don't forget to send the invitation.
No problem.
And another thing I saw online was, I think it was on the Niagara Independent. There was an article that you had mentioned about, this is probably about a year and a bit ago now, talking about the increase of minimum wage going up to $14 and how that has affected, many different industries in the economy overall. So I just want to know, like, how, I guess, like, looking a year beyond, like, how have things like turned out? Because I know prices of so many things have gone up, like food prices have gone up.
So yeah, the average. So our costs, our back end costs, they've gone up immensely. Now I tried to mitigate as much as I could. I do a lot of my own sourcing for product and that stuff. I'm very diligent in keeping my pricing in line, but things have really risen. About 16% is what the industry has been saying. Is about 16% has been the overall food costs increase because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course my labor costs went up. You can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So I increased my prices, but it didn't really cover all of it.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking to probably, and now we got the carbon tax in, so we're going to have to make some more minor adjustments just to kind of level that out.
Mm-hmm. And with I know a lot of businesses are very happy that the increase didn't go further to $15. And so my background, I've studied economics at Brock, mm-hmm. and like, I know people probably think I'm crazy when I say this, but I don't think there should even be a minimum wage. I think that people should be able to bargain for whatever wage that they think that they're capable of and that people are willing to pay them for. I mean, like, obviously there needs to be worker conditions, and I don't want to see anyone put into a dangerous situation. We still need to have work standards, but I've always had that thought that, like, if you have a minimum wage that is far too high than what people want to bargain for, then people are able to pay for. And let's say you're a brand new worker and you don't have any skills. You are just, I guess, good for basic labor at that point. You can plant tomatoes. You can, I don't know, you can't even juggle 3 balls at that point. Like, how are you going to be able to apply for a job that, requires 15 or 20, whatever that minimum is, if you haven't been able to build those skills? Like, are we going to require everyone to just absolutely volunteer until they're able to maybe squish their way into the labor market? Like, I don't know. I feel like, I mean, we do have a system right now where, like, different roles have different minimums, but I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts with that? Like, I know it's probably a bit of an extreme stance.
Well, no, I don't think it is, because many countries in Europe just recently put in a minimum wage. In fact, Germany just recently put one in not too long ago. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and it's not anywhere near as high as ours, by the way. And they have a larger economy, mm-hmm. right? And they're overall more successful, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially with their exporting.
Well, yeah, and they have a great apprenticeship. The way they handle their ascension into the workforce from youth is so much better than the way we do it.
Yeah.
There's some lessons you can take from that. Minimum wage. Yeah. Minimum wage it was never meant to be a career choice. It was meant to be a starting point, an introduction into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
When you crank that up too high, what you do is eliminate certain segments from breaking into the workforce, or that you're delaying their entry in. So, for example, an employer now is faced with a choice. They have a young person who, just graduated high school at 19, 20 years old, like you said, with no skills or mm-hmm. anything like that, and doesn't really know the responsibilities of work and life and all that other stuff. And they have an older person who maybe is a little bit more marginal, but needs a job and is willing to work and all that other stuff, and they don't have any of the complications that come with a younger person, and so you look at who you're going to invest your time and money into training. Mm-hmm. Right? Is it going to be the 35-year-old who has responsibilities and mm-hmm. has bills to pay, or is it going to be the 20-year-old who doesn't have a care in the world, who may or may not stay with you?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And is just looking for maybe either a summer job or whatever it is, or part-time. So who are you going to invest your money in? You're going to invest in the older guy. And we see that now with an increased youth unemployment rate. We're at, I think, about 25% right now, under 25, I think. I may be fudging the numbers a little bit, but
it's high.
It's somewhere around there,
yeah.
right? So and that's part of the consideration that you say. And you walk into a grocery store now and look at who the cashiers are, right? They're not young people anymore, right? They're not, who are they? They're older people. Either they're retirees and they're supplementing their pensions and they're doing part-time to do that, and the owner of the grocery store is willing to invest in those people because they know that they're not going to have problems with them calling in sick or not showing up, you know what I mean? So they're willing to invest the money into them. if you start minimum wage lower, and people can say, well, there's youth programs, there's student programs, and all that other stuff. Well, you know what? The owner's got to fill out all this paperwork. They got to do all this stuff. They got to make all
very
this.
reluctant.
I mean, there's a lot involved when you're doing that. It's not just you snap your fingers and you're going to get $2 an hour back from the government.
It's a process. It's an application.
Exactly.
We know how much red tape can be involved with that, and how
so
much delay.
I mean, there's a lot of different aspects when it comes to that kind of thing. A lot of things need to be considered. But like you said, minimum wage was never. It's not necessarily in practice around the world, not the way it is here anyways.
Well, so I want to go back to what you said earlier about Germany. So when I used to work at Mercedes-Benz Financial Services over in Mississauga, and so I made friends with this beautiful German girl who actually was doing an exchange from Germany over in Canada. And it's the way she explained it. It was like almost every program that you take after high school there has like an apprenticeship built right into it. Like that basically by getting accepted into the program, you're getting pretty much accepted into like a certain category of employers and jobs that they have available, which makes so much sense. Like, because I took co-op. I thought if I'm going to university, I need to make sure that I have some sort of a chance that I'm able to work at the end of this. Because I always try to think anytime I get a job or I'm applying anywhere, what would the employer want? If I, put yourself in that person's shoes, who are you going to hire? I would not hire myself if I just walked in with a degree and nothing else. And if I'm like walking in and I've got my resume, I'm like, well, I went to school here, like, please take me. Like, I'm going to say, get out of here. Like, it's horrible because if everyone has the same mentality, like when you think universally, how are these people ever going to get trained? They're not. Like, people have to like volunteer for years.
No, we're putting limits on that kind of apprenticeship here. We need to take, the Ford government's actually doing some good things where that's concerned. They're trying to eliminate all that kind of stuff. We're putting too many limits on how many apprentices can get in and how many this and how many. Nobody's willing. Like if you look at the way the trades people are hiring now, they don't want the first year journeyman. They want you second or third. Yeah. You look at all their advertisements and they want second or third because they don't want to train the guy for the first year.
Yeah.
Right. Because they need guys who are ready to work and do stuff a little bit more independently. Right. Because they're only allowed so many people. Right. So it's tough. Like, I don't understand. I didn't understand the reasoning behind some of those limitations. Maybe there was good reasoning. Maybe there wasn't. I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, it's hampered the ascension into workforce for a lot of these people. And actually, it discourages. So we don't encourage trades anyways. I mean, we need to do a little bit better job of that.
Well, for too long, they've made it seem like, oh, you don't want to be like a grease monkey, or you don't want to be, you don't want to get your hands dirty. Like, better off getting a desk job. Like what someone told me when I was in second year was the reason they went to university was because they realized that your body is a tool that wears out over time. So if you're, for example, like a bricklayer, sure, it's great money starting off even, but eventually your body's going to break down from being on your knees all the time filling in bricks.
I suppose.
But then that your brain is like a muscle, and that the more you use it, the stronger it gets. So you may as well find a job that's in that kind of a field. But and then like so contradicting. You look at how many people have heart attacks, die in their chairs from sitting for 30 years and not getting enough exercise.
So my grandfather was a master bricklayer.
Perfect. Bring it on.
He had a great career. He didn't become a multimillionaire. He worked for a company all his life, but he put in his time. He did hard work, and he's 89 years old now, and still got his mental faculties, and he's he was physically fit his entire life. I mean, he's having some health issues now, but at the end of the day, there you go, right? So
no, and I totally I guess I wanted to address basically how people have been overall, or at least from my experience in going to university, where it's its own micro bubble of culture. So many people out there are trying to say, poo-poo to any of the trades. Like, we're the smart ones. We figured it out. And I am not that kind of mentality at all. My first job after my first year of university, I was a roofer. Mm-hmm. So I understand it's tough work. It has to be done, and it's worth doing. I mean, I am a tougher person because of it too. Absolutely. And there's a lot of things you're not going to learn from going just to university and from taking the easy road.
But like I said, there's something to be learned from any trade. You can make money if you're willing to work hard and dedicate yourself to your job.
And that's a correlation there. People don't want to work as hard these days. No. People are just so used to just having whatever resource available at their fingertips at any time. So it translates into a lot of other things in life too, where they just don't feel like they want to work as hard. Everyone wants a simple job where they just sit on their ass and do nothing, and that people feed them and pay them and bathe them. So I was actually asking one of my friends who's involved in the home building associations of Niagara, and I said, so Chuck, if I were to drop out right now of like my school, like, so I'm studying AI and big data right now, so like completely opposite from the trade. Said like, Chuck, if I were to drop out and I want to just make money, what trade would I go into? And he said bricklaying. You'd be a millionaire before you're done. So
nowadays, yes, absolutely. See, back in the days of my grandfather,
there was enough people willing to work.
There were lots. Nowadays, though, that is a dying skill. I mean, it's part of the reason why a lot of houses aren't built from brick anymore. I mean, or stone. They're only partially done because it's just so expensive to get them.
Because the labor costs are ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is probably an unpopular opinion as well, but I mean, so those generations, and like I'd say probably up until like people probably born like post 80s, definitely on average, and not everyone, for that hardworking person born in the year 2000, kudos to you. But on average, I feel like people have just felt like, oh, I don't need to work hard in life. But I think it's because, especially when you look at people that were born in the 30s and the 40s, when you look and you're like, my brothers and my family, my friends, my neighbors are going to war and dying, like I will do whatever else and I will work as hard as I can because I know I am so lucky to be here and not to be fighting. And I'm so lucky to be able to, build things for my country instead of having to go and fight for my country and risk my life. So I think, like, honestly, this sounds ridiculous, but we haven't had any kind of wars like that for so long. I mean, at least like Canada hasn't been heavily involved in anything like that. And I think that is part of the reason why people, born in the past like few years are less likely to want to work hard. Just they don't realize how hard it could be.
They haven't suffered hardship. And in that sense, Canada is very fortunate. We haven't had to suffer that kind of hardship. I mean, my father was born in Greece post Civil War and then post World War II. He was born just after the two, and it was very hard for those people during that time. My uncles and aunts lived through a hard time. So, and my father was born into basically a very poor, struggling nation at that time, right? So, and with a large family, it was tough. It wasn't easy. We haven't had to suffer those hardships here in Canada, and we're lucky.
Oh, very, yeah. And, I would never say, wish upon a war so that people work harder, of course.
No, but I mean,
but that's reality, though. I believe
it is reality for a lot of people who've come here from different countries, right? So.
Yeah, and I can relate. I mean, obviously not myself, but my mom's mom was born, I believe it was 1936. So, that was right when the war was just starting up, and I can't imagine like being born and like to be 4 years old and for your family to tell you like, oh, like climb under your bed and like let's play a game, let's play not die, or And so then her dad was gone to the war. I believe she was about 2 years old when, so yeah, it would have been about 38 when he left. She didn't meet her dad like as like I guess more of a not a full grown adult, but like didn't really get to know her dad until I think it was like 1946 or maybe even 47. Like it was like after the end of the war, he ended up basically walking, hitchhiking any way he could to get all the way from, I believe that his camp was northern Italy, and where they lived was the very southern point of Sicily and Pechino. So they had to he had to travel all across to get back. And like my Nolan is the kind of person that like if you have a crumb on your plate, say like, what's the matter with you? Like and I've definitely taken that with me. Like if I'm ever out for dinner with friends and like they eat half a sandwich and they're just like, take it. Like part of me wants to like, there are times where I'm like, well, I guess I have to eat it. Like I have to be able to absorb these calories for those poor people out there who, I can think of like my Nolna, for example, like not being able to have like this sandwich. I'm like, well, someone has to, it's that old phrase like, oh, there's a starving kid in Africa, so don't waste your food or like eat your dinner. That was and I guess we were talking about, I love these tangents that we can go down to, like all starting with minimum wage. Oh yeah, I read this book by Sam Walton, beautiful guy, and I also read this book. It's Grinding It Out by Ray Kroc. He's the guy who turned McDonald's into the crazy corporation it is today. And it's funny because in both books they talk about how they basically never want to see any of the people on the front line ever be replaced by a machine. And these books were both written, I believe, in the 80s. So just when computers were first being like installed in a lot of these businesses, and they're like, yeah, these computers have done a lot, but I don't think you could ever replace the smile you get from like a McDonald's employee when you're being cashed out. Well, Ray Kroc, I'm sorry. I know, rest your soul, but it's happened.
Yeah.
And minimum wage has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of funny. So you look at like all the McDonald's, they were smart. They put a lot of their machines in right before the minimum wage hike.
Yeah.
And Tim Hortons, I mean, I think they're trying to do whatever they can to like lower the need for the labor they have. So like they've been trying to push like their app to be able to download ahead of time. I mean, if the person just has to like make the orders, then you don't have to have a person that takes the orders. So, and that's the problem when you economics 101, you raise minimum wage, you increase unemployment.
Well, if you push up the cost of manual labor, you'll be replaced by automated labor.
Yeah,
it's just the way it goes, you know. And I'm not saying that people don't need to make money or incrementally more over time, but at the end of the day, you can't force that to happen. When you put artificial forces into the market, then you're forcing people out of it.
Yeah,
right? And that's where
you're creating inefficiencies, and not the way the system is now. Now you have more people dependent on the tax base. So yeah, I wish that like it was a requirement for every elected official to take some sort of like an economics lesson.
I believe I've facetiously said in the past that nobody should be allowed to run unless they've run a business for 5 years.
Yeah, no, and like I honestly I have to agree with you on that. And if that was the requirement, I would do whatever I could to get involved with the accounting of any business, or to understand like the bottom line of what has to be done to be able to make their bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's something that me and Gus were actually talking about, I think 2 weeks ago at Brooks and Barley. And Gus, you still owe me a meal. I paid for your wings that day. They were delicious, I'm sure. But that it should be a requirement to be able to understand finances is like something that a lot of people don't have any idea about. I mean, we were living with still like even after the 2008 crisis, which I thought would have scared enough people, still living at record levels of debt. I think we've had the most foreclosures. We've had the most seizures of vehicles in the past, I think, year or two than we've had since
more bankruptcies than ever.
Yeah. And I think there should also be a test. Like it should be like some sort of like, the same way you have a test for when you enter into like a university or something. Now, if we did do like a test like that, and there was like, let's say you had to get, the most you can get is 1,000, and like, let's say you have to get at least 750 to be like eligible. Do you think that we should make those public? Like, because I mean, the problem is you might have someone that spent their whole life in school who has like figured out ways to be more efficient with test taking. You might have someone else who's been busy working in their field for 30, 40 years coming in and being like, oh, it's been a while since I've done this. So I wonder if that would be something like to just have up there for public opinion. Do you think that's worth it or not?
I don't know necessarily that that's worth it, because it doesn't. Being able to do some math equations isn't the only measure. It's the measure of being able to understand how things affect other things. It's not necessarily it is math, but it's not just straight math, right?
Yeah, it's not mental math. It's not like just doing
it's not doing a simple equation, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I went through this online in our Facebook group there with the carbon tax. And, everybody's saying, oh, the rebate that they're giving you is going to cover all the costs. Well, no, it's not. Because if you're the average family of 4 and you have 2 vehicles, and I mean, just in the added fuel costs on a weekly basis over the year, plus your increased home heating costs, you will far exceed what the rebate is. And add on top of your grocery bill. I mean, I don't know how people think the vegetables and the product get into the grocery store, but it comes by truck.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's the same thing when like people think like, oh, with like minimum wage like are going up, like that's only going to cost like the end. But no, you don't think about how much labor is involved with every step of the process.
Exactly, the whole supply chain. Like they don't. People tend to not consider the entire supply chain. It's not 5 cents per liter just on the guy delivering it to the store. It's the guy who there's 3-4 distributors right down that chain.
Yeah.
It could have come from overseas on a boat, and maybe they're filling up their gas, their tanks over here. I mean, it's just these guys. I mean, people who don't understand. even if it puts up the average cost of groceries by 3%, you know, on a $300 bill for a family of four, and that's modest, right, on a weekly basis. Okay, so that's $9 a week more, you know, by 52 weeks. Right?
Yeah, you got $540 extra
there you go.
right there.
So, and you know, the rebate this year is $300. And then the carbon tax goes up to 6.3 cents next year.
Yeah.
And then it goes up to like 9 point something, then to 11.3. So incrementally every year. And they're saying, well, we're going to increase the rebate. We're going to increase the rebate. But you're also, and it's compound. It's not, like I said, the straight cost is more. So I did some quick math, and it was like $1,500 added a year for a family of four. And you're getting $300 back. Well, thank you very much.
Well, the way someone tried to like explain this on, I forget if it's Facebook or wherever, they were like, well, it's like giving someone $20 and them giving you like 3 5s back and saying you have more money than before. And like, so again, like another tangent we went down. We were talking about talking about like that whole thing about if we had to like put a test out, if we were like running like to show our ability of this, that, and the other. Like one of the things I've learned since the election is that it's not about how smart you are, but it's about your ability to have those who are intelligent like in front of you or before you, to be able to have that human relation, to understand like that, you know, you don't need to be an expert on everything, but you need to make sure that you have someone in close contact or someone working with you that is an expert.
But if you have a willing to accept someone else's opinion on what should be done and what shouldn't be done. And when you get guys in there who think like career politicians or whatever, who think that they know what's best when it comes to business, or a career PhD like Kathleen Wynne was. She's a career student basically, you know, and she went into teaching and did all, and she's a PhD, and you can surround yourself with PhDs, but they don't have the first clue about the actual realities of economics because they haven't been involved in it.
Yeah.
Right. And there's nothing like, it's just like trying to tell, you know, you're watching a bricklayer lay bricks on a wall and you're telling him what to do. Right. Yeah. Even though you've never put a brick down before.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. You're judging them. Why'd you do this? Why didn't you do that instead? And it's funny. Like, so speaking with like my economics professors, like asking them, like, I was actually a teaching assistant back in 4th year of my economics. So I got to know a lot of the professors who were nearby. And I asked them, like, so, like, you know, what do you think I should do after university? And like almost all of them said, like, go get a job, like go work, like don't. It's funny coming from these guys who spent so much time behind a desk, saying, you know, go out there and like gain the experience you can. I mean, like I used to think, well, I still do think this sometimes, how great it would be to be a professor, like, and it's for the wrong reasons. It's like, oh, to have like, you know, a really nice wage and to be able to have summers off and to like time to, you know, and
it's a good life.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be. I mean, there's a one professor at in an economics department at Brock who taught not just me, but also my mother about like 30 plus years ago, and still teaching there. I guess it's got to be a decent job. So I saw another article it was the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce and Niagara Realtors. They had a questionnaire. I believe they sent it to all the candidates running for regional in Niagara Falls. And so they're talking about housing. And so you mentioned that there was like a lack of inventory of housing and that you were wanting to be able to speed up the development to be able to build more within Niagara Falls. And so I have heard that Niagara Falls tends to be a little more lenient when it comes to building. Like we know in Niagara Lake, it's a lot more difficult, not just because we have so much less urban property that we're able to build on, but that there's definitely like more political resistance to it. So like, and it's funny because so I actually sat down with the Niagara Regional Labor Council back when I was running. I believe this is back in September, and correct me, you know, anyone out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't end up sponsoring or endorsing any candidate for Lord Mayor of Niagara Lake. And I think it's because they asked me, I'm assuming they asked this, hopefully they asked the same questions the other two, was, you know, what's your stance on low income housing in Niagara Lake? Like, would you be willing to spend public money to like subsidize housing and to like bring in like low income housing? And I said, no, like, you know, and I have to represent what the people of Niagara Lake want and what I believe. And I believe that people don't want to have low income housing around because it tends to lower property values of any property around it because of like, you know, and it's unfortunate, but people that tend to need not all people. I mean, there are people who are in like difficult circumstances, like single mothers and people who, are just in, with disabilities and things like that. And I wish all the best to them, but unfortunately it tends to bring also another crowd of people that can lower property values nearby. And I mean, for those people as well, typically people that rely on I guess subsidized housing also rely on transit and on having like a good transit system to get around, because a lot of those people who can't afford housing on their own can't afford a car on their own. So I said to them, I was like, well, I don't think that's something that like I could endorse. I can't I can't promise you that, because that's not something I think is right for Niagara Lake.
So I may be wrong on this, and maybe someone out there knows, but low income housing, I think you qualify for low income housing, or the way they figure it out is the affordability is 75% of what the market value is on certain.
Yeah, I think it's like the amount of money it would take for your housing compared to like what your income is or something.
Yeah, and I think that figure comes in somewhere around. I think I read somewhere. I can't remember who it was. I said. I think it was around $1,800 a month for Niagara Lake. So low income housing isn't really no low income housing in Niagara Lake.
Yeah, right? Yeah, because it reflects on the property nearby.
Affordable housing is a different story, where stuff is built cheaper and it's available for sale, but at a lower price. You have higher densities and whatnot. But at the end of the day, what's needed in Niagara Lake, and there's the issue for Niagara Lake is we have a lot of a service industry here. And a lot of the people who work in the industry can't afford to live here.
Yeah.
Right. And it would help the service industry in the area here, whether it be the Strip in Niagara Lake, whether it be the wineries, whether it be me out in St. David's or whoever else, if more of those people could afford to live here. So we wouldn't mind. I don't think it would be a bad thing to see a few apartment buildings up here and there, I don't know what the specifics are with respect to Niagara Lake. I haven't been involved down here with that so much. Regionally, low income or affordable housing, to make houses more affordable, it's a market thing. Basic math. The more houses available on the market, the less upward pressure there is on prices, and so. The provincial government now is taking steps to reduce some of the red tape, but a lot of it gets held up at the region, right? The region is responsible for a lot of the holdups. There's a lot of shenanigans go on there with respect to building applications and whatnot. I've talked to a few developers and a few consultants, and they all say the same thing. There's, you walk into a room and you got 6-7 guys there, and they all got different requests from you, and you're trying to satisfy each one in 6 months to get this guy's done, 6 months to get approval on that guy. By the time next thing you know, it's 2 years before, and you're into the planning. You haven't even broken ground yet. You're 2 years delayed. Like it's crazy. So
well, I know there's a lot of when you add in that extra layer of having like the dual system of having to deal with the local municipality and the regional, you have issues with when there's any more than one layer of government involved with what you're doing, there's always those issues. And one thing interesting is like when you're driving out to Hamilton, and when you're in Hamilton, because suddenly there's a lot more businesses on each side of the highway, and not just because like with changes to like the type of property like going from Greenbelt, but like it's significant, like the businesses that you see there. And I always wonder that can't just be a fluke. There's obviously like some sort of simplicity and applying to be able to build these things over there compared to here. And so we had those consultations. Many consultations. We had the online consultation about amalgamation. We had actually representatives from the province down. One of them was the former chair of Waterloo, I believe. And so they were asking people, what would you like to see happen? We're here to hear any thoughts that you might have. And I know one of the things, there's a few people saying they wanted to see a one city model. I think it was Donald Zeraldo was one of the delegates there who said he wanted to see one city of Niagara. And there were some individuals saying like, we want just our towns. And I don't know. I don't think that's the direction that the province is heading in. They especially, you look at they want to amalgamate ambulance services, and they want to amalgamate, I think it's public health as well, like with several different counties. So any thoughts on that?
Well, as far as amalgamation goes, I have thoughts on that. The region is a fairly ineffective level of government as far as service delivery and the other stuff. I mean, they tend to be an overbloated bureaucracy, and it's large, and it doesn't really function very well because it's servicing all 12 different municipalities. I've always been since the discussion of amalgamation came up. I've been on the side of reducing the amount of municipalities, getting rid of the region. And I think that that's the best course of action because it allows for, I mean, ultimately, the ultimate destination for Niagara is going to be one city. We're just not ready for that step yet. It's a leap rather than a step, right? There's too many unique and centralized population centers around Niagara in order for you to be able to have one. Like if you compare us, a lot of comparisons between Sudbury or Ottawa or whatever, but there you have one large, massive population center in both of those situations. And then you have surrounding boroughs and communities that have been amalgamated into that, into one section. We're not like that. We have a pocket of population here, over there, over here.
Yeah.
So it's hard to centralize that because what ends up happening is, so the highest population densities will control most of the seats on an amalgamated council, and they'll be able to push the directions. There will be underserviced areas, as there are now. We've seen problems with waste and water and wastewater and waste management and bridges and you name it. We've had problems with because they just don't deliver the services properly. It just doesn't happen right. And so I've always been of the opinion that we should go down to 4 cities, basically along the provincial riding association lines. And the reason I say that is because what you create in that scenario is basically 4 almost equal municipalities within the region. St. Catharines has about 150,000 people, and Niagara Falls would end up with 130,000 with Niagara Lake and Fort Erie, and then Welland, Thorold, and
I guess what is that?
And
like,
Port Colborne.
Right. Would that also include? I think on those drawings, it also includes like West Lincoln, Lincoln, and Waynfleet. If I'm not
That's on the other side. That's part of Lincoln.
Right? Oh, okay. So that'd be
Pelham.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So that would be, and they would have about 100,000, right? And Welland would be just over 100,000, and Niagara would be 130, and St. Catharines would be 150. Now, what you have in that scenario is you have 4 separate municipalities, fairly decent sized municipalities, where there's efficiencies once you reach a certain size. And you've got commonality of direction.
Yeah.
Right? Fort Erie, Niagara Lake, Niagara Falls, we're border cities, we're tourism based.
Yeah, we all share the river.
We've got agriculture, we've got all that stuff. So it's just a natural kind of. We already share some services between Niagara Lake and Niagara Falls, anyways.
Well, even when you think about like the Parkway has like the Niagara Parks that go all up and down, so there's already some.
Exactly. It's just a natural fit. St. Catharines is large enough to stay on its own, doesn't really need to amalgamate with anybody else. The rest of the western end of the region, they have commonality there between Grimsby, Beamsville, Smithville, and the rest of the small towns along that area, Pelham, Vineland, Jordan.
Well, now this makes me curious because I'm just trying to think of other parallels to like how this could look. So when you're saying like this 4-city model, I've started to think like, well, what municipalities are around that are near each other that have like these dense amounts of people per like each named municipality. I'm thinking of like Halton region. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Burlington, Oakville, Milton, and I guess I'm trying to think like surrounding Milton, but it's definitely those few municipalities. And so it's funny how like you have like cities as large as what would be proposed here, like St. Catharines about 130. I think Oakville has almost 200,000. Then Burlington, I believe, is just below that. I could be completely wrong, but I think like 150,000. Milton has, I think, about 100,000 now. But then so they still have like one region around them, all of Halton. They still have like their central Halton government. They still have like Halton Regional Police. So I guess I want to start with that. Like, would you still suggest that Niagara Regional Police would be their own unit, or are you thinking that it would be more efficient or better off to serve it individually per city?
No, that in something like that in a shared, there would have to be there would still be some shared services.
Mm-hmm.
Niagara Regional Police being one of them, but that's managed by a board. It has its own budget, has its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Every municipality pays anyways. The way it happens now, we pay for policing. It goes straight into the police budget, and they do that. So, and it can be done the same way, where the police board bills each municipality for the police services of that municipality, and it would be a seamless transition. It wouldn't really affect police service. Other stuff, other small boards and stuff like that can be it can be managed by a common board with 2 reps per municipality or 1 rep per municipality on a, let's say, a 5-person board. With a chair appointed by the province. You get 1 rep, and they can manage any of those shared services, whether it be regional transit or anything like that. Or let's say we have a waste management contract that we find deficiencies still to stay as one unit.
Although, to bargain together.
Yeah, although I wouldn't.
Yeah, we've seen a track record.
Based on what we've seen going on lately. So, there's those efficiencies. Like we don't need that layer of 40 or whatever it is now, 34 politicians at the region. And we definitely don't need the representation that we have now across the region. 444 politicians. We have 12 CAOs for each municipality. We have 12 planning departments. We have 12. I mean, we could reduce that down to 4. We get rid of half of that, the management of the bureaucracy, the bureaucracy there, and the region itself the bureaucracy would just it would vanish, right? And I think probably looking at significant savings, taxpayer savings locally on a local basis. And you still get somewhat local control over issues. Now, there's going to be
there's always negatives as well.
I mean, Niagara Lake, they want to keep their uniqueness, and, they're afraid of Niagara Falls and Fort Erie. But you know what? Listen, I don't know. I think it's a lot of unnecessary fear. And the thing is this: everybody in Niagara Falls understands what Niagara on the Lake is.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't allow
the identity
to be gone, because it would ruin what it is, right? They understand that. And ultimately, the voting percentages, Niagara on Lake's much higher than the rest. So they would actually have a disproportionate say in policy rather than not. Right?
Well, depending how our system is set. Like, let's say we had a ward system where, like, the 75% of voters here that are willing to vote still only vote for those 2 people. And, like, even if it was 10% that voted in Niagara Falls, they would still have, like, whatever amount of people represents, like, that number of people. So, well,
they would still get the attention of the mayor. I mean, if there's, let's say, if you have, I don't know how many registered voters there are here in Niagara Lake.
I think it's about 15. Between 13 and 15,000, I think.
So, okay. So 13 and 15,000 and let's say it's 15,000 in 3 years from now. 15,000, you guys get 50 or 50% turnout like you did last election. That's 7,500 votes for the mayor. The mayor is going to come and seek those votes, because Niagara Falls, it's 36% of 60,000, mm-hmm. right? So it's a significant chunk for Niagara Lake, disproportionate based on their population, right? But they still have they'll still have the ear of the mayor. So, to say that Niagara Lake is not going to, have influence or say, I mean, you're looking at representation. If you got an 8-man council plus a mayor, probably 1 to 15,000, 1 to 16,000, something like that. So Niagara Lake would probably end up with 1, maybe 2, depending on
how we cut it, how many people we want. And the one of the negatives I always hear is like about how will the capital between each town be shared afterwards. And so the one story I always like to bring up is I met this guy who knew someone who was a firefighter in Binbrook, just outside of Hamilton. And then they amalgamated Hamilton with the surrounding municipalities. I think it was like Ancaster, Dundas, Stony Creek, Binbrook. And what happened was, I guess one day he was at the working as he was a firefighter, and then some I guess the way we worded it, like some big shots from the city came in, and they liked how we had a nice new truck that was all pretty and shiny, and they said, let's take this one to downtown. We'll send you what's left. So they took it to downtown Hamilton, and up came this rusty 30-year-old machine that they were now using. I don't know about 30 year, but like a way older machine. Mm-hmm. And so that's where us in Niagara Lake are like, please no, because we are very, especially when you think like relatively financially responsible with our assets. Mm-hmm. We've been able to have surpluses even in difficult years. And so that's one of our biggest concerns is like, we don't want to lose out and have the leftover trucks from Niagara Falls or from anywhere else.
Well, let me put you guys at ease a little bit here. Right. So I brought, just because I knew we were going to touch on this, so I brought some facts and figures here for you. And okay, so now Fort Erie has a total budget of $64 million.
That's their annual budget?
That's their annual budget. Their capital expenses and operational expenses. Fort Erie also has a net debt. Actually, they have a net surplus of $824,000. Okay. So, they have liabilities of $8,405,000, and they have reserves of $9 million. Okay. So they actually are in the green, right? And so it's $824,000 there. Niagara Falls, city of Niagara Falls, has a budget of $173,327,000. Their net debt is $51 million, but their surplus, their reserves, is $37 million.
So they're about 13 million.
So 14 million. They're only negative 14 million, and you have to remember that Niagara Falls has a very significant revenue, right? Revenue stream. They could eliminate. They only carry debt for the sake of carrying debt. They're not carrying it because they need to. Mm-hmm. So $14 million. Niagara on the Lake. You guys here, your net liabilities are $3 million. And 12 million surplus. So you got a surplus of $9 million for Niagara on the Lake. So, I mean, financially, the Niagara corridor is sitting very pretty.
Comfy, yeah.
Right. There's no reason. I mean, we have good revenues. We have a decent tax rate. There's no reason why to fear any kind of untold debt. That isn't the case, however, in going to a
full one city model,
full one city model. And I'll explain to you why. The city of St. Catharines has a net liability of $108 million and only reserves of $17 million. So their net debt is $91 million.
Yeah, so I can see why you wouldn't want to.
Number one, so let's go further on that. The city of St. Catharines doesn't own their hydro. Niagara Falls does. They don't have that asset anymore. They sold it off, and they still have $91 million debt. Wow. Niagara Falls owns theirs. Niagara on the Lake owns theirs. We don't have really a worry about that. Pelham, another one. 30. What's theirs here? Let me just right here. Okay. They're $32 million, their liabilities. Their reserves are $3.8 million, so it's about $28 million.
Pelham's population is
17,000, which is about the same size as Niagara on the Lake.
That's a lot when you think about that person.
It's huge. So between the two there, you're looking at $120 million in net debt, right? And that's something that we would all have to pay.
Yeah.
Should we go into one city? And not to mention, okay, so we all have to take our portion of the regional debt. We just want to get rid of the region, but the regional debt is actually not that bad. It's the entire net liability of the region is $60 million. So it would be proportionally distributed. Mm-hmm. So we could absorb that quite easily, actually. And, the reason why I say we need to watch about the the one Niagara scenario isn't just this. It's this combined with, so the tax burden here. So what's going to happen in a one city scenario? Do you so they're going to get rid of the planning departments and all that stuff. But what they're really going to do is they're just going to upload everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the average tax rate of the region will end up at the highest tax rate of the municipalities, which is St. Catharines.
Because people don't bargain down; they only want to bargain up. Yeah, I've heard the same thing with like firefighter services, or like having to. People have the fear that suddenly Niagara Lake will have to have a full-time fire department, but I don't really buy into that because our system has worked as well as it has worked for our entire existence. I don't know if we've ever had a full-time like paid firefighter department. So I think like that's a silly misconception.
I think that sooner or later it's going to happen for Niagara Lake anyways. They're going to need at least one full-time station.
Yeah. Especially
it's just getting to the population, right? But the thing is, that's better absorbed by Niagara Lake if they're within a greater area. That would automatically happen in a one city thing. There's still volunteer stations in the south end of Niagara Falls once you get out to Chippewa and Willoughby and those areas. Mm-hmm. Volunteer stations in Niagara Lake would still stay the same. Yeah. You probably have an increase of full-timers coming down with the eventuality that sooner or later they will put a full-time fire station here somewhere. Probably maybe Virgil or whatever.
Yeah, somewhere central probably, yeah.
So, but there's not really a lot to fear as far as a four-city model goes. If I'm a resident of Niagara Lake, though, I want nothing to do with a one-city model. And frankly, it's about governance, too.
Is it the fear that when a government becomes too large, it becomes less accountable to the people?
Look, where are they going to go for the votes?
Yeah.
Right?
To the main city. That's it.
Right? So they're going to go to the population centers and everybody else is going to get ignored. And that's all there is to it. I mean, it happens. And whether you have a ward system or not. So let me put it this way. If Niagara Lake has one city councilor out of 8 in Niagara Falls, mm-hmm. but they have a high proportion of the vote, and they have the year of the mayor, as opposed to in the region, and they have one city councilor, which they have, or one regional councilor right now, as they have, mm-hmm. But they have one city councilor, okay, in an amalgamated region of 34 councilors or 35 councilors.
Yeah.
So where's your voice?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's one of the issues that was raised when I was running for Lord Mayor. And they thought like, well, how are you going to get anything done in region? That kind of just, not just like you, Dan Turner, but how are you as like a mayor of Niagara Lake going to be able to handle anything? And what I've kind of seen from I've only been into politics for a few years now, but just looking at, I guess, like in the past, what's had to be done. And it almost seems like there like needs to be a coalition between like the more agricultural communities to stand mm-hmm. together on issues that are more relatable to them that people in the city won't have. I mean, so one of the big things that we worry about here in Niagara Lake, or like you see a lot of it on like the Facebook pages or just talking to people, is that like when you look at the seats of all the regional council made up from the city of St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, and Welland, it's such a huge proportion. And, people that live in cities are going to have city issues, and people that live in the rural area are going to have rural issues. Obviously, there's issues that we all face together, like high blood pressure and cholesterol and things like that. Mm-hmm. But that's been a big issue around here. It's just that thought that we're going to lose our representation. But that is a good point you raised about, with our high turnout, no matter what, the person that is running for that top spot is going to have to pay attention to the people that are actually going out to vote. Mm-hmm. So, it doesn't matter looking at the people living in Ward 2 or whatever ward in Niagara Falls or Fort Erie. He's got to look, where are the people that are going to actually show up and vote? Those are the people I need to cater to. Exactly. And I mean, that's where all the spending ends up going in elections and with other things. I mean, with where the community center is going to be placed, it's going to be placed where the people vote.
Well, exactly, and like I said, in a one city region, Niagara Lake isn't going to have that kind of influence over the vote, because it is only 7,500 votes. Because you can sit right into St. Catharines and you've got 150,000 people there. Even if they only get 40% turnout, it's quite a bit, right? So it's 60,000 people or whatever. And then you've got Niagara Falls, and so they're going to concentrate on those areas, and they won't care about
That's funny. Your billboard will get more bang for its buck in Niagara Lake.
Well, it'll get more bang for its buck, but they won't spend the money out here in a one city scenario.
Yeah.
Now, if you go to an amalgamated, like I said, Niagara Falls scenario, it's different because
that more traffic.
It just that 7,500 votes weighs more in a smaller community, right? So it's just a matter of numbers there. But like I said, one step at a time. This ultimately, 30 years from now, if we get infill and we're at 700,000 population or 750,000 population, or 40 years from now,
Wainfleet's bursting from its seams.
Well, exactly. Like, we've got flow between communities. Then yes, absolutely. A one city model makes sense because now transit needs to be one thing, fire services maybe need to be amalgamated. Maybe all water and wastewater needs to. The funny thing is water and wastewater actually works the way, if you divide it up 4 cities, each municipality can handle its own water, wastewater, which is actually pretty. I just found that funny that we wouldn't have to worry about dividing that up either. But overall, like, we're just not. It's just there's too many unique nooks to the southern tier doesn't have the same interests as the northern, and the eastern and the west. It's just we're just too segregated, and we can't speak with one voice even if we wanted to, because there's too many different areas of concern here. It's just too diverse right now.
Well, there's a few simple issues, or I guess like lesser issues. Like the one thing people say is like, well, I mean, now we're going to have all these main streets, and people put in their GPS, like 20 Main Street, Niagara. It's like, well, which one? Like Niagara Lake, or like, I know, like, but when you go on Google Maps and you look up, like, let's say 20 Main Street, Jordan, like Jordan isn't technically a municipality, but it's like a suburb, yet it still has its unique address on there. So I'm sure Google's probably got the technology to send an engineer to figure that one out. But so you mentioned about how, if we are heading in that direction where eventually we'll have 700,000 or 800,000 or 1 million people, then maybe that's when it'll be worth having one municipality. Why not just prepare and do that now? Like,
well, so that's not to say that we can't prepare. But if you do it now, what you do is you can't build infrastructure, or and then fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
What you have to do is grow it, right? So we go to 4 cities now, but every city and the province in its when it comes down to make the decision says to itself and makes a note in its little municipal plan and says, 30 years from now we'll revisit the issue. Mm-hmm. This is how you guys should proceed when it comes to looking where you're going to grow, how you're going to do. They can set that policy for you. Like, you can now actually have the framework put in place for it to be there 30 years from now.
Right.
And you can push growth into those areas where you need to infill and where you need to do this. And the province can start that process now. But it's a step, for me, anyways, in my mind, it's a step process, because if you leap into that now and you never do get in that infilling, now you're inefficient forever.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the one thing I like thinking about is, like, if you're trying to guess, how things are going to, or how things should go in the future, look to the past. So you look to the past. Before we became the Niagara region, we had, I think, 33 municipalities. Mm-hmm. Thought it was hilarious how there was North and South Grimsby. I always imagined like some crazy civil war, and then one day they came together to form the one mega Grimsby. But you're looking in that direction. Then I guess the next step would be to go into like the 4-city model that's been proposed by. I don't even think like the province wasn't the one to say this is what it is, but so many people just were like, this is like the idea that makes sense. Like, just putting it at the ridings because it evens up the population to a pretty good extent. And like, it's kind of funny to think that the province could even run with that model. Like, they haven't ruled it out, but I mean, they haven't really ruled out anything at this point. And then also it's funny to think like, the biggest reason is about like cutting the cost and making it more efficient. Now, the word efficient comes up a million times. And I just wonder like how much the consultation and all this process is actually costing to implement. So I know, like, looking back at when Toronto amalgamated and they got rid of, I think it was called like the Metropolitan Toronto. It was basically like the region of Toronto. And they became just one city, that they still haven't like made the efficiencies that were like proposed by the government back then. So like that's another thing I'm worried about. Like how long will it take until the efficiencies are made in place? And there's going to be so much resistance. Like I just wonder like what kind of things could go wrong. Like if I was the CAO of like I don't know, like some city, I don't want to name a certain one in case whatever CAO might be listening, but if I was CAO of city A and I was going to be amalgamated into A, B, and C, and they're only keeping CAO B, like I'm saying like what the heck, like I put all my hard work into this and now I'm getting laid off, like maybe I'll get some lesser position at the new conglomerate, whatever it might be. But I wonder, like, is there any room for error in there? Like, you now have so many disgruntled employees. Like, I can just see so much going wrong. But I mean, that fear isn't enough to stop us. Like, there's.
Yeah, look, I don't think. I mean, if you were to go to a one city model, then you have 12 unemployed CAOs. But but I mean, so that's basically what's going to happen. But the thing is when you go to 12, what they'll just do is upload everything, right? Everything gets uploaded, nothing changes basically. And the only thing that's going to change is our tax rate is going to go to the highest possible point. Whoever's got the highest mill rate out of any of these guys, that's what we're going to end up paying. Because there isn't going to be a separate rate for Niagara Lake and St. Catharines.
But with that same logic, then you could say that if we have the 3 city model or having the 3 towns, then that will be having services uploaded and cost more. But I guess it'll be lesser extent than if it was one.
No, actually, it gets downloaded, right? The region's responsibilities get downloaded.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It goes the other way. So they get downloaded, and there's efficiencies to be found with the downloading. And the reason why there's efficiencies there is because you don't need all that stuff.
And
right?
like we said before, if there already is an efficiency at, like, let's say having regional police rather than individual, then those would probably stay in place since they're already built foundations.
The foundations there, the board's there. There's no reason to change any of it.
Yeah.
So there would be no change in that kind of service. EMS, same thing, although it's getting amalgamated now. We'll see what happens there, how the province decides how that's going to work. Health department, long-term care, and that gets downloaded to each individual municipality. Different things, there's significant cost savings to be found by going to 4 cities, as opposed to uploading everything up to 1. And so if you look at what you want to do for efficiency of services, effectiveness for services, cost of services, tax rates, all that other stuff, the 4 city model right now makes more sense than a 1 city model. The 1 city model is the future, but the future isn't now, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know how long it's going to be before we hit that. We can guess all we like, but we don't really know.
Yeah. We're not going to start building roads in the sky until it's needed.
No, exactly, right? But that's basically what the 1 city is proposing, right? Let's put all the infrastructure in place, and then we'll just fill in. Well, what happens if you don't, right? So.
Well, Chris, you've opened my eyes to, a whole lot of different perspectives on this, and I'm sure you are, and a lot of people are very interested in seeing like what's actually going to happen, like how this is going to play out, and I obviously I wish the best for all the people in Niagara. We're all one region or whatever we are.
We all want the best for the region.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm glad that we were able to come today to discuss this. I've got another 2 pages of questions. We already hit a whole hour. So I guess that just means I have to copy over it another time soon.
No problem.
Perfect. And sorry, I didn't offer you like a beer or anything there. But
I got my water. I'm good.
All right, perfect. Well, yeah, and I also, you got to bug Gus to come on. I haven't even asked me. I know he's busy. He's got his 2 toddlers. He's got his businesses, and I know you're a busy guy too. And I'm ever thankful to have you on. And so when Gus said, "Hey, my friend Chris might want to come on," I thought, heck yeah, let's do this. And I guess the last thing I want to touch on is a lot of people are really curious about what's going on with a new conservative candidate in Niagara Falls and Fort Erie with Rob Nicholson stepping down. There was a lot of rumors like, oh, maybe Peter Nicholson, his son, is going to run. Any announcements that you want to make at this time or about that?
No, I'm not. Well, I'll make this announcement. I considered it for about 3 minutes, right? And I've got 4 young girls who need their father at home.
Yeah.
So Ottawa is not in my future. But federal politics interests me greatly. I've always had a kind of interest in it. But we got some good candidates out there. who are vying for the nomination. I think there's 7 of them, 8 now, maybe. Throw their name in.
Yeah, I got to go to those events and see exactly why people are pulling in each direction. It really makes them unique. That's a problem. You have too many people sometimes that all have the exact same vision, but I'm the one that's going to deliver this vision. No, and I mean, you're seeing this in the States with the U.S. election, and that's a whole other podcast we'll have to do. Yeah, promise me you'll come back before the next election. We can talk some.
I absolutely anytime you want. Just hit me up and we'll try to make it work for sure.
Awesome, and shout out again to Gus. Thanks, Gus, for setting this up.
Thanks, Gus.
And thanks again. Ciao.